Today we're talking about the 2019 film called The Long Walk. It was a film made in Laos by a filmmaker named Maddie Do, and she was born to Laotian parents, and then she moved back to Laos. She has made three feature films. So Chanthali, Dearest Sister, and The Long Walk. And I've heard a bit about Dearest Sister before, and it looks pretty awesome. Her film, The Long Walk, I just watched, and it was so interesting. Like, I'm a big sci-fi guy, and time travel stuff, I know a lot of people hate it. My dad hates time travel stuff usually, but everyone's so caught up with like the how time travel works and everything, but like this movie makes it work so well because it barely talks about it that much. The way it's visualized isn't like just like this time travel device or like anything very specific like that. The way that they time travel is by using this woman, and they walk along a path and they go to whatever time it seems like she deems necessary. Now, before I go into spoilers, yes, this is a time travel movie, but it is really more about our main characters and them trying to process grief and using time travel as a way to express that and explore that. And it's really, really cool once you find out what's happening in the very end. And yeah, like I said, if you're going into this expecting some sci-fi, and I saw a lot of places it was marketed as a horror movie, and people are saying like, oh, watching this a part of like a horror festival. I don't think it's really dives into horror like at all. Yes, there's like a ghost character in the movie. And yes, some of the themes are unsettling. There's some like crime that happens, but like I really would not classify this as a horror movie. And like, yeah, it's vaguely a sci-fi movie. It's really a drama about these characters going through a lot of grief, and also just like the country that they live in and how external factors are impacting that as well. There's like a side plot with all that. And it was just a really, really cool genre blend. And after I watched the movie, I watched this interview on the Horror Hour, which is funny. Like I said, yeah, it's really not really a horror movie at all. But I watched this interview, and what they had to say was really, really interesting. And like they talk all full on spoilers in this and just about their thoughts about their movie. Like her and her husband, the director Maddie Do, and her husband, whose name is escaping me, who wrote the screenplay. They seem very laid back. They seem very just excited about their film and the filmmaking process, filming it in Laos. And yeah, just this interview provided a lot of insight. I really, really recommend it. And yeah, it is a slow movie. Also, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of scenes with minimal dialogue, and you have to try to piece together where they are, maybe not even physically, also in time, and what the motivations are, because there is like the time travel repercussion kind of thing going on. But this one is very, very loose, and it doesn't try to describe to the viewers what exactly is happening in this time traveling. So yeah, you do have to pay attention. It's not one where you can just put on the movie and sit back. You do have to pay attention, but I think it's really rewarding. I really don't 100% have a complete idea of everything that goes down. I think that I have a general idea of what happened, but there's still some pieces that I probably could thread together if I rewatched it. But so that would be my spoiler-free sayings. But right now, let's just go right into spoilers, because really what I wanted to talk about firstly was the way time travel was used. Because I love analyzing time travel in certain movies. A few that are highlights to me are like, Time Crimes. Love Time Crimes. I watched that with a bunch of my friends. So fun to think about. I mean, things like Interstellar, and just like, I love talking about all these time travel concepts. And in this one, the thing that struck me the most, that I thought was just like the coolest idea once I thought about it more, was that the vehicle for time travel in this movie is this woman, and she's a ghost. She died in the movie. And when she died, her kind of purgatory was to be on this road and guide this guy throughout his life, through different periods of time, just by walking down this road. And I think the coolest part of it all is that, the vehicle is her. And in her reality, it seems like that she can experience time at any point. She's just a conduit of like any time in that place. And she's just experiencing all of these times at the same time and can just grab this guy at a certain moment in time and like bring him to places where she thinks that he might need to go. And it's just cool thinking about what her experience is like, her existence is like, being alive at all these different times, but yet looking the same at the entire movie. And it's just really, really cool that, yeah, the conduit for the time travel is this woman who kind of makes this guy experience time travel through her will. And it's a cool contrast to a lot of other time travel movies where it's like, yeah, you set a dial to where you want to go. You want to go to the future, you want to go back in time. And it's very like a lot of people trying to make it very scientific, but this one is very much more spiritual, and it was a nice, refreshing way of doing that. And just, yeah, it was really, really cool and unique. I can't really think of any other movie that does it this way. So yeah, it was really, really cool to see. And so as for the plot, trying to piece everything together. So if you're confused after watching the movie, so it seems like the general plot is this. The young boy, one day when he was walking along the path, he found a girl dying in the forest, and she pleaded him to hold her hand and, yeah, not let go. And so he goes and he holds her hand. And this woman ended up being the time travel woman who walks along the road and guides him throughout his life. And the one thing that this interview did really well was help contextualize why this happens. Because in that culture, in Laos, it seems like, I'm sure I'm not going to be 100% factual here, but it seemed like that whenever somebody dies suddenly, they often try to rush and get them like a ceremony, try to bury them properly, try to bury them in a certain place. Because when you bury them, or if they're not buried, or if they don't have this custom, this ceremony that the usual happen, their spirit isn't allowed to fully travel where they need to go into the afterlife. And so they're kind of just like stuck. You're really holding back their soul. So if you don't have a ceremony in the first place, not just for somebody who has an accidental death, you are holding back their soul, kind of trapping and gatekeeping. I don't know if that's the right word there, but you're kind of trapping their soul and not letting them to pass on. And so, I mean, that in itself has a lot of like just thematic connections to grief, where not letting go and everything. And it was really, really cool the way they visualized it in this movie, because we see at the beginning of the movie, he's going around to these posts and lighting these candles and everything. And then he buries this one girl, and there's a lot of people around just standing in the forest. And at first you're like, okay, what's happening? Does everybody in the village know this person died and that this is happening? But then you come to realize that these are all of his past people that he's buried. And when you figure out what's happening in the end, the sinister part about it is that he has buried, or he's killed all these people. He is a serial killer. And they're kind of trapped, attached to him. He hasn't let their souls moved on to where they needed to go. And so, yeah, I mean, if you watch this interview, I'm sure Matty Doe explains it a lot better than I just did, but that's the gist of it. That's what I got from it. And yeah, it was a really, really cool serial killer turn. I mean, I love serial killer movies. I love sci-fi movies, and like the low keyness about both of those, the subtleness, read between the lines of all of it, was just really cool to see. And just, yeah, I might even move this rating up. Like, the more I think about it, the more I like it. But yeah, that was really cool to see that, yeah, all those people that he has essentially killed. Because after this young boy has experienced this thing in the forest, he goes back to his house, and his house where his mother is dying of some disease, some lung disease it seemed like, and his father is very abusive, trying to make him work, and eventually his father just moves away to the city and never comes back. And so I guess there's kind of two very distinct moments in there. One, the moment of the woman's death, because she is the conduit for the time travel, and two, his mother's death. Because essentially the movie is, this guy cannot get over and has not properly processed the death of his mother. His father moved away shortly after, and he stayed in that house that he grew up in, that house where his mother died. He isolated himself from like everybody, which pretty much is like, yeah, he's not moving on. He hasn't had any really meaningful emotional connections to anybody. He has just been wallowing in that grief for like 50 years. And eventually what we come to find out is that he becomes a serial killer because he cannot process his grief from his mother dying. He watched it in a very graphic way. And again, she explains that in the interview very interestingly, that it was the death of the mother in this movie was somewhat based on the real life death of her mother, because her mother had a terminal disease and didn't want to get any treatment because she was just prolonging it. And so the way that she died was surrounded by a lot of her family. And it was very graphic and natural. And yeah, it really came across in this movie because, yeah, it was not like a happy, or I mean, not to say that the death scene is happy. It wasn't like a very peaceful, she goes to sleep. She was, she was sick. She was convulsing and everything. So yeah, very tragic. And that like image of that death, how graphic it was a very good indicator that, yeah, that definitely left a mark on him. And because of that grief that happens in that moment, because the death was so graphic, he goes around, and when he finds like older women, I think it was mainly women, yeah, I guess maybe just connecting to his mother, he just goes around, find these older women who are like dying, and in his mind he thinks that he's putting them out of their misery, helping them have a more peaceful death by literally poisoning them with a drink. Yes, they were probably going to die shortly after, but by him doing that, the connections to the culture in Laos was very interesting, because that act of killing them, whereas they may have died shortly after, it's made so much worse because of their traditions and how he's not allowing their souls to properly move on to where they need to go. And that's the real criminal part of all of it, because he's really, yeah, he's locking up their souls. They're all surrounding him in that forest, attached to him. Essentially, their whole world is just watching him kill a bunch of other people. And yeah, that's probably their whole reality in that forest, watching that happen. Along with this serial killer narrative of him killing people with these terminal diseases, it seems like there's a lot of very just details about like traditions in their culture, like the thing with like cutting off their fingers. And I mean, just like the small details in the movie just made it work so well, because yeah, again, time travel is very, very difficult to do. And so now we can kind of get into the affecting your future, because yeah, using time travel and affecting your future is not really an original concept. But again, I think that the fact that this woman, the way that she's making this guy time travel is so non-linear. It's like she makes him pop in and out of certain moments in like certain time. It's not like, yeah, he's not deciding where he's going. She can pop in and out. And the way that the butterfly effect is happening isn't like linear. It's like, yeah, just you go back and he did one small thing different, and he goes a bit in the future, it's different. He goes back again, maybe does something slightly different as well, and then he goes even further in the future, and everything has kind of like been brought together. I don't know if it's alternate timelines or something, but just the way it's presented is very foggy, but very succinct and nice at the same time. It just all makes sense. Because yeah, essentially the guy, because he was so impacted by his mother's death, started killing people. And then he goes back in time. Pretty much the entire plot here is he goes back in time thanks to this woman, and he tries to alter what happened to him as a child and what he has been doing to all these other women. He has been killing them when they're on the brink of death in the first place. He does that to his mother right in front of his younger self. And in the younger kid's mind, he just sees somebody coming in and killing his mother. So that grief that was struck onto him, that he was trying to save his past self from, was just amplified, because yeah, he is now just, I mean, maybe he made himself a serial killer because he went back and did that. But I mean, the original guy didn't have the memory of that happening in the first place. He had the memory of her dying normally. So maybe he made himself a serial killer. oh, maybe that's the way it went. But I mean, yeah, again, like I said with the time travel stuff, I could be wrong about that. I could be right about that. But yeah, it's very fuzzy, but it's very nice at the same time. It makes a lot of sense by not making sense. But it's very poetic. It's very nice. It's a good drama. Yeah, I really, really liked it. Again, yeah, like I said, the time travel butterfly effect was so subdued. The serial killerness was also very subdued. And it was just, yeah, it was really, really cool to see the subtleness of the movie. And yeah, like I said, now you can probably see why this movie is so much about grief and him not processing his grief. He's going around like this stoic like guy who can talk to souls, and everybody around the village knows him as this guy who can talk to souls. The police come to his house and they're like, this old woman is missing from this woman in town. She's like, oh, my mother's missing. And then they're like, so they come, and as the audience, we know that he probably had something to do with it. And so we're like, oh gosh, are they going to try to bust him? But no, they ask him for help, being like, we know that you can contact souls. Can you help and find where this woman is? If she's died, can you like talk to her? And then the woman comes along and she tries to get him to talk to her. She's trying to get herself some relief from the grief that she's feeling. And then eventually he locks her in his house and tortures her. Which, why does he do that? I mean, from our perspective, we never see him like actively torture her. We just see him coming in and she has been tortured by some version of him. And then, yeah, of course, she tries to break out, stabs him, and which ended up killing him in the end. And yeah, there's just a lot going on behind the scenes that is kind of difficult to put together, but it seems so detailed and so deep. Like, yeah, why? Because, yeah, she was staying with him. And maybe there's just another version of him that just got so much more into serial killing and was just so much more abusive towards women that he just locked her up and cut off some of her fingers. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and just, yeah, the details of this movie, they all work so well together. Again, the performances as well were all incredible. I thought the little kid was great. Yeah, overall, I really appreciated this movie. The genre blend, very unique. I would highly, highly recommend this movie to anybody.